these refugees arriving. Overall, in Canada, the private involvement of Canadian citizens or residents in the resettlement of refugees dates back to the Indo-Chinese crisis. I think most of you are aware about that. Those were the beginnings of participation of citizens in adding capacity to the role of government in settling and integrating refugees. And at present, we have over 93 such groups or ethnic communities across Canada that are involved in settling and integrating refugees in various communities. Now, in Toronto, or the Greater Toronto area, we are fortunate to have nearly 25 of such groups that are involved in the settlement and integration of refugees. And most tend to be faith communities, as well as also ethnic groups, such as, say, the Afghan Association or the Ethiopian or Eritrean communities in that regard. So most of them are the ones that are involved in the day-to-day work of settling and integrating refugees. But you also have to factor, we have also welcome centers, or what sometimes are called as settlement agencies. Those are government-funded groups or organizations that help with the transition of the refugees once they arrive here to Canada. And their services are mostly what I would call as the 9 to 5 type of services. While with the private groups, usually it's a 24/7 type of work. So it's a lot of work and commitment in that regard. I'll probably focus specifically in terms of the work that our organization has done, sort of to give you a picture of what is involved in the integration and settlement of refugees. First and foremost, the selection of refugees tends to be the work of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And this usually happens in refugee camps, or in the situation of the Middle East, we have a lot of refugees in urban settings. So that's where most of the refugees tend to be. And because resettlement is not an option for each and every refugee, currently we have nearly about 19.5 million refugees in the world. But if you include displaced people, that's where the number comes to 60 million. Okay, so there's a stark difference in that regard between displaced people and actually refugees who have crossed the borders to other countries. And therefore, when they decide to select people who would qualify for the resettlement program, they have to meet a certain criteria, and different countries have different criteria for identifying who meets what. Now, in the situation of Canada, obviously, you have the two streams. You have the government program, which is basically refugees that are referred by the United Nations to the Canadian government for resettlement under the government program called the Government Assisted Refugees. And you then have also refugees that are privately identified by private groups, like the Archdiocese of Toronto. Now, currently, with the situation of the Syrian refugees, we have mostly been relying on refugees that are referred by the UN to the government of Canada. Now, additionally, also, we have refugees who have relatives already here in Canada that are committed to seeing that they can sponsor their family members to come to Canada. And that is probably the largest number so far that has been able to come, unlike the ones that are being referred by the UN. It's a small number that has made its way through. And so in that regard, we have made it a very deliberate decision that we oftentimes send a mission team to go to the Middle East to try to identify and screen and select refugees that most times would never qualify under the program of the government. For reasons that the government has limited capacity in terms of the resources it dedicates to those refugees, and therefore it tends mostly to focus on the most vulnerable, meaning that those that are elderly or with large family sizes, or those with physical or mental disabilities. And it's a fairly small number that they can take because of the fact that it needs a lot of care, and it is usually 2 years or more commitment in that regard. Then you have the other people who generally don't fit that criteria. But if we are given an opportunity, we would probably integrate a lot faster and quicker. And so because of that, we deliberately go out and try to screen and identify those kinds of refugees who have no chance, no hope, no relatives, no friends to assist them to come to Canada. And those are the kind of refugees that our office tries to assist each and every year. Since the beginning of this year, as Chantal mentioned, this crisis began a few years back already, and we have been working on this for the longest time. We already have in the pipeline nearly 2,000 refugees. And since January until now, we have already received nearly 300 refugees that have arrived from Iraq and from Syria. So this kind of goes to show you that quietly, private individuals are busy working to see what they can do in order to assist refugees. But obviously, if you focus on what is being expressed in the media, it may not necessarily give you hope that there's so much being done on the ground. The efforts of groups that are involved in the integration of refugees privately is really a commitment of 1 year. But the commitment of 1 year is only from the time when the refugee arrives at the airport. Most times, the work that really needs to be done is even before the refugees are here. So you have to plan, to put together a proper plan which will ensure that they have a place where they will stay, they have access to social services, things such as ESL or linked classes, schools where the kids will have to go and attend once they've arrived here. You have to ensure that they have access to family physicians, doctors, to take care of any medical conditions that they may have had, which really never received proper attention while they were in the camps. You also have to think about the opportunities for work for these people, because most of them tended to have been people who were actually middle-class type of families in their own countries before the situation changed for the worse. So some of them do have a good level of education and could transfer those skills towards some kinds of employment opportunities. But we are very realistic in terms of what newcomers can expect. So we often focus on survival jobs. We talk about things like painting, cleaning houses or buildings, landscape work, maybe working in restaurants. So things like that, all type of jobs, but which help them to start out while they work their way towards building hopefully a career and learning the so-called Canadian experience. So these are the sort of things that you have to put in place. Now, beyond that, obviously, you need the human resources. By that I mean volunteers. The people who tend to do this work are not paid employees. These are just people who give of their time, who give of their heart and their love to assist these newcomers. Most times you have volunteers who offer their time 24/7, and then they combine that with the paid employees from the settlement workers who usually give their time from 9 to 5. So the combination of these two is very critical in that aspect. Now, in recent years, the previous government had made a lot of cuts to some of the social services which were intended for newcomers in the name of, I would say, balancing the budget and other things. However, in light of the increasing demand and also the increasing number of newcomers arriving to Canada, these services may probably need to be put in place because of the increased needs of refugees that come. And additional, of course, you have to think about the financial aspect of it as well, because bringing refugees to Canada means you need funds, you need resources. Now, in our case, most of our funds are mobilized from generous individuals within our faith communities who come forward and donate of whatever little that they have. And that is what determines our capacity in terms of what we may be able to bring to Canada by the numbers of refugees that we can. Beyond that, there is no other kind of government support that goes to private individuals to assist them. And so these are some of the things that when we think about resettlement, we oftentimes simply think about, okay, how many people we bring, but we don't think about the work that goes into that. Just to conclude, what I would probably say is that before we consider how much involvement we need to have, we also have to think about how much are we willing to give in terms of the resources to match our commitment, as well as also what is the dedication in terms of the ordinary citizens towards the work that is required. Because it's not a few weeks or a few months commitment, it's a 1 year and more commitment, because even after the first year, there are people who still need help beyond that. And therefore, we have to be prepared to continue to offer that help to ensure that these people become successful Canadians and very well-meaning citizens to our whole society. Thank you.